Hello friends and welcome to Smart Coach. Today we'll be talking about the reign of Shah Jahan. So Shah Jahan's administration, okay. Now as far as Shah Jahan's administration is concerned, it has certain points that need to be looked at, and those points are mostly regarding to the expansion of the Mughal Empire. However, if we are talking about Shah Jahan, let us first get a brief overview also about Shah Jahan, who he was and how he came to the throne. Now, looking into the question from that perspective, Shah Jahan arrived on the throne or ascended the throne of the Mughal Empire in 1628, and he went on to reign up until 1658. All right. However, it does not mean that Shah Jahan died in 1658, as we know that Shah Jahan was imprisoned by his son Aurangzeb, and he continued to live up until 1666 when he died, and the conditions under which he died were certainly most pitiable. Okay, so he was kept under house arrest in the declining years of his reign. He was kept under house arrest by his own son Aurangzeb, and Aurangzeb ascended the throne after him in 1658. However, when we come to the accession of Shah Jahan himself, Shah Jahan ascended the throne on 1628, and he did so by fighting a war of succession with his brother Shahryar. All right. So he had fought a war of succession against his brother Shahryar. All right. So and this was because of the fact that Noor Jahan, all right, the wife of Jahangir, Noor Jahan, had favored a policy of supporting Shahryar as the next ruler of the Mughal Empire. Although Noor Jahan's own brother Asaf Khan, who was Noor Jahan's own brother and was a prominent noble in the administration of Jahangir, he had favored Shah Jahan. Okay, Shah Jahan. And we have to remember that he favored Shah Jahan because of a pertinent fact. And the fact is that Asaf Khan was the father-in-law of Shah Jahan. All right. So as Prince Khurram, which is Shah Jahan's name, okay, as Prince Khurram, he was married to Mumtaz Mahal, who was the daughter of Asaf Khan, okay, and therefore Asaf Khan was working for Shah Jahan, and he was working for Shah Jahan to get elected or selected as the Mughal ruler, okay. However, Noor Jahan was working for Shahryar to get selected as the next Mughal emperor. All right. And all of this happened while Jahangir was still alive, but Jahangir's years were declining and he was getting ill day by day, okay, and therefore most of the administration was under the hands of Noor Jahan, and Noor Jahan shaped the administrative policy and shaped the policies of the empire during this particular period, okay, and therefore she was very influential in the life of Noor Jahan, and this resulted in this struggle between Prince Khurram and Shahryar. Later on, we understand that Khurram, he was able to defeat his brother Shahryar. He also killed some of his nephews and other brothers, okay, and cousins, and by doing so he ascended the throne in 1628. So Shah Jahan's ascension to the throne is not bloodless, okay, it is also a result of bloodshed. All right. Now, as far as Shah Jahan is concerned, some of the important things that you have to know is, firstly, we have to talk about a rebellion, and this rebellion is the Bundela rebellion, okay. Bundela rebellion. As far as the Bundela rebellion is concerned, it arose out of the kingdom of Bundelkhand, and it was conducted by the son of Bir Singh Bundela, okay. His son Jujhar Singh conducted a rebellion against Shah Jahan, and Shah Jahan quickly dispatched Jujhar Singh. Okay, it was not much of a worry to the Mughal Empire. Of course, it was a worry to the Mughal Empire, but the Mughal Empire was able to come out of this rebellion. Right. So this is one of the things that you have to remember about Shah Jahan's career, the Bundela rebellion. Another thing that you have to know about Shah Jahan is the conflict with the Portuguese. Okay, so Shah Jahan came into conflict with the Portuguese in Bengal, okay, specifically at Calcutta, all right, in Hooghly primarily. because in this region, the Portuguese were very influential in their trade. However, the Portuguese were also abusing the rights that were given to them by the Mughals, all right, their trading rights and their rights to settle upon Indian land, which were given by the Mughal Empire. They were trying to, or they were actually actively, they were abusing these privileges. Firstly, forced conversions, okay, forced conversions, and also forced slavery. So, forced conversion and forced slavery were rampant tactics of the Portuguese. So, Portuguese, they will abduct orphan children and they will convert them forcefully. They would also forcefully abduct people and sell them in slavery. So, these kind of activities were being conducted by the Portuguese, okay, in Bengal region, and because of that they came under a conflict with Shah Jahan, and Shah Jahan quickly defeated them also and expelled the Portuguese all right. But however, you have to remember, this is temporary and the Portuguese do return back, all right. They do return back and they do continue their trading activities in India. So, these are some of the highlights of Shah Jahan's reign, okay, early reign. Then of course comes the main highlight, and as far as the main highlights are concerned, you have to remember a campaign on Kandahar, all right, a campaign on Kandahar, that is his NWFP, okay. So, the Mughals, especially Shah Jahan, had always been worried about the securing of the borders in the northwest frontier provinces, and to secure the borders in the northwest frontier provinces so that there cannot be any incursion into India, they always wanted to increase the boundaries of the empire and to keep certain regions as buffer regions, all right. And in order to do so, Shah Jahan understood that taking of Kandahar was important, okay. Kandahar, which was at that point of time which was under the Safavid Empire, okay, which was a Persian empire, all right. So, Kandahar was under the Safavids of Persia, and this is the particular region which Shah Jahan wanted to take a hold of, all right, and he was able to do so, okay. In 1638, he was able to do so, and the reign lasted up till 1649, all right. However, this was temporary, that is about 11 years, okay. This was temporary, and the Safavids were again able to come round to Kandahar and able to take down the Mughal forts or Mughal occupied forts in Kandahar. As far as Kandahar is concerned, it is a province in Afghanistan, okay. So, that much you also have to know, it is in Afghanistan, and there are certain forts there which Mughals occupied during the occupation of this region, and they were again defeated by the Persians, and the Persians again came in, all right. So, this is the northwest frontier policy, and for the first time Shah Jahan was able to take out Kandahar, all right. However, it was temporary, and Kandahar, it seems, was lost to the Mughal Empire forever, all right. The northwest frontier province extending beyond Afghanistan was lost to the Mughals forever, because after this point of time, no other emperor, Aurangzeb included, makes a attempt in the northwest frontier region, all right. So, as far as Kandahar is concerned, this is the story, and then of course we come to the story of Balkh and Badakhshan, all right. Badakhshan, Balkh and Badakhshan, which are again in Afghanistan, all right. And to this region, Shah Jahan, he deployed his own son Murad Bakhsh, all right. Murad Bakhsh was chosen, BAKSH, all right. Murad Bakhsh was chosen as the leader or the commander of this particular campaign, and he was deployed to Balkh and Badakhshan. Initially, they could gain some ground, but Murad Bakhsh, he decided to come back without taking the permission of his own father, all right. And therefore, Aurangzeb was again shifted to Balkh and Badakhshan, but Aurangzeb also could not come up with a decisive victory out there, and therefore the Mughals had to retreat back, all right. And Jadunath Sarkar, one of the historians who has worked on the decline of the Mughal Empire, who has also worked on the history of Aurangzeb, he has suggested that this particular campaigns, all right, running into the campaigns of northwest frontier provinces and the campaigns of Balkh and Badakhshan, it cost the Mughal Empire a lot of money, in return for which the Mughal Empire did not really get any revenue or any substantial revenue in return. And this he also counts as one of the you see follies of the Mughal emperors. Okay, he also counts this as one of the you see one of the reasons why the Mughal empire could not succeed to sustain itself for a longer period of time. Well, this is part of his larger thesis. All right. So going on from there, what else do we have to study as far as Shah Jahan is concerned? As far as Shah Jahan is concerned, another area that you have to study is the area of the arts. Okay, and as far as the arts are concerned, you have to study architecture. Now, there is a separate video on Mughal architecture, but however, we will let us recount some of the architectural activities of the Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan. As far as his architectural activities are concerned, some distinctive changes takes place in the features of Mughal architecture during Shah Jahan's time, and these include the use of white marble. All right. So from our architecture video, you will already understand what kind of shifts are taking place. Okay. So he insists, or Shah Jahan insisted upon the use of white marble. All right. So white marble becomes predominant. As far as the monuments are concerned, the number one monument that you have to know is Taj Mahal. All right. And then of course there is the Red Fort or the Delhi Fort. Okay. The Delhi Fort. Then there is of course also the Moti Masjid. All right. Moti Masjid in Agra, which was constructed by Shah Jahan, and there is also the Jama Masjid in Delhi. Okay, so these are some of the primary architectural contributions which Shah Jahan made to his empire: the Taj Mahal, the Red Fort, the Moti Masjid, the Jama Masjid. As far as the Moti Masjid is concerned, remember there are two Moti Masjid, one constructed by Aurangzeb, another constructed by Shah Jahan. Shah Jahan's Moti Masjid is located in Agra, Aurangzeb's Moti Masjid is located within the Delhi Fort. Okay, so these are other parts of Shah Jahan's reign. Now, after we have discussed his reign in some particular detail, we will also have to look into the declining years of Shah Jahan and the importance of Aurangzeb. Now, when we are discussing that portion, we will have to discuss the Deccan policy of Shah Jahan, which is another important part of his reign. Okay, so we will look into it now. Now, since we have discussed some of the fundamental areas which we have to study as far as Shah Jahan's administration is concerned, we have also to study one of the most important areas, and that is the Deccan policy. Okay, the Deccan policy of Shah Jahan. All right, and the Deccan policy of Shah Jahan is very important because it is in this during this point of time when the Mughals they establish their suzerainty over the Deccan. All right. So the Mughals are successful at this particular point of time to establish their powers, formidable power over the Deccan region. Now, when we are talking about Deccan region, again another cautious tale. When we are looking into the Deccan, we have to look at the Deccan through the shifting political outlines of the Deccan. Okay, so at one point of time when there was the Vijayanagar and the Bahmani kingdom, now 5 other kingdoms had come up. That is the Ahmednagar, Bijapur, Golconda, Bidar and Berar. All right, Bidar and Berar they get extinguished, and the survivors are, by the time of Shah Jahan's time, the survivors of the Deccan, all right, and the Deccani kingdoms that are there, okay, bordering around the Mughal territories, they are Ahmednagar, Bijapur and Golconda. Now, let me make it very clear. Ahmednagar ends up being annexed by the Mughals and being extinguished. Okay, Bijapur and Golconda, they do survive Shah Jahan's Deccan policy, but they remain what? They remain tributaries of the Mughal rulers. In a sense, they are vassals. All right, vassals of the Mughal ruler. All right. Now, when we are talking about such aspects as tributaries or vassals, somebody accepting the suzerainty of some other king, it means that a patron and client form of relation has been established between these states. So, we will see that the Mughals turn out to be the patrons of the states such as Bijapur and Golconda, and Bijapur and Golconda remain client states. All right, they have to pay tributes in the form of money, tributes in the acceptance of political power of the Mughals, and also tributes in the form of military fief. All right, Military fief means sending military in times of conflict or accepting military service of the Mughals. Okay, and this is all the result of Shah Jahan's Deccan policy. Okay, so we are going to study that now. Now, moving forward, what do we see? We see that Shah Jahan comes into conflict with Ahmednagar at a quite, early portion of his reign. Okay, and however, in this conflict between Ahmednagar and the Mughal Empire was initially not very successful because of the presence of a very important noble. Okay, very important Deccani noble. His name is Malik Amber. All right, Malik Amber. All right. And as far as Malik Amber is considered, we know that Malik Amber was an Abyssinian or an Ethiopian person. Okay. He was from Ethiopia in Africa, and he had come to India, and he had found employment in Ahmednagar, and he had become very important as far as the policies of Ahmednagar goes. He had become the prime minister of the Nizam Shahi rulers of Ahmednagar. So the Ahmednagar rulers were known as Nizams, and therefore their reign was also known as the Nizam Shahi reign. All right. So he had become very important noble of the Nizam Shahi rulers, and because of his tactics, all right, because of the great important political and revenue maneuvers that he did, because of the many reforms that he came up with, and also because of his military prowess, he was able to thwart the Mughal Empire's design upon Ahmednagar. Okay, because you have to remember that it is Malik Amber who brought guerrilla fighting into India. Okay, Malik Amber brought guerrilla fighting into India. It is from being employed in the court of Ahmednagar as military chiefs, the Marathas learned guerrilla warfare. So Shivaji's father also used to work in the court of Ahmednagar. All right. So Shahji used to work for Ahmednagar. This is something which is very important in the Deccan policy. Okay, while we are studying the Deccan policy of Shah Jahan, it also becomes important when we are studying the Deccan policy of Aurangzeb. All right, so we know that this was the situation when Shah Jahan came into conflict with Ahmednagar. He wanted to annex Ahmednagar, and this, of course, he could do only after Malik Amber died. All right, and this was possible only in 1633 when Shah Jahan was able to annex Ahmednagar through a conflict. He was able to annex Ahmednagar into the Mughal Empire and make it part of Mughal India. All right. However, things took a turn to the worse because Shahaji, he installed another, survivor of the Nizam Shahi dynasty. He installed a minor survivor of the Nizam Shahi dynasty as the, new ruler of Ahmednagar, ruler in absence. All right. So this Ahmednagar had already become part of Mughal Empire, but Shahaji wanted to install this survivor of the Nizam Shahi dynasty as the new ruler of Ahmednagar. However, this plan was also thwarted, and this was done by Aurangzeb. All right. So Aurangzeb finally got the Ahmednagar to submit. Okay, Aurangzeb as the viceroy of Deccan, he got the Ahmednagar state to submit, and so in 1636, with the help of Aurangzeb, Ahmednagar formally came under the Mughals. Okay, and then proceeding forward, then the Mughals started to impose their powers over Bijapur and Golconda. Okay, so by 1636, the Mughals also demanded that the Bijapur and Golconda state, they try to accept the suzerainty of the Mughals, and they were threatened with outright conflict. Okay, and certain Deccani states, they also started to conspire with Shahaji, all right, against the Mughals. However, these designs and schemes of the southern Deccani states did not materialize, and by 1636, they also had to accept the superiority of the Mughal Empire. Okay, and this was all carried out, most of it was carried out by Aurangzeb. All right, because Aurangzeb was a well battle tested prince of the Shah Jahan's administration, and he had been tested in adverse circumstances in Gujarat also when he served the term as the viceroy of Gujarat, and now coming down to the Deccan, he also managed to make his mark. However, the favor of Shah Jahan, and now we come to the last stage of our story. However, Shah Jahan's favor was with the brother of Aurangzeb, Dara. All right, Dara Shikoh. So Dara Shikoh had already and always been a favorite of Shah Jahan, and Dara Shikoh was the one person who was slated to be the next person to become the Mughal ruler. Apart from Dara Shikoh, there are other brothers of Aurangzeb with the name Murad and Shuja. So we have to remember that Aurangzeb had to overcome the threat from Dara, Murad and Shuja in order to become the ruler. As far as Dara is considered, Dara was defeated in the battles of Samugar and Dharmat. So the first battle to take place was the Battle of Dharmat, and in the Battle of Dharmat, although Dara was defeated, it was not a decisive victory, and only during the Battle of Samugar, Aurangzeb could make a decisive victory over Dara Shikoh. It was during this battle also that Aurangzeb put his father in house arrest at Agra. Okay, so during the Battle of Samugar, all right, in and around this time, Shah Jahan was put at house arrest at Agra, and after the defeat of Dara, Dara was captured and he was killed. His head was severed and it was presented to his father Shah Jahan as a mark of rebellion by Aurangzeb. All right, and it is in this fashion that in 1658 Aurangzeb became the new ruler of the Mughal Empire. However, Shah Jahan continued his life, which was a life of real misery. All right, because he was under constant supervision, and Aurangzeb really did not pay much attention to how he lived or how he survived, and Shah Jahan continued to live in this state up until the year 1666 when he died of the illness, all right, which had actually started all of these struggles, because by 1658 Shah Jahan had started to fall ill, and because of these circumstances we see that a war of succession between the brothers, it started to materialize. Now, as far as war of successions during the Mughal period is concerned, one concept that you will have to wrap your head around is that there was no clear policy of primogeniture. All right, so there was no clear policy as to who is going to succeed the ruler. All right, so all of the brothers were equally, suppose a Mughal ruler is about to die, so all of the brothers, if a Mughal ruler has more than one son, all right, so all of the siblings were equally had equal rights to the throne, and therefore they had to fight it out in order to claim the throne. If there is no presence of a particularly well defined rule of succession. Okay, this is the situation, and it is because of this that we find that wars of successions are quite common in the Mughal Empire. However, if an emperor who is strong and willing and he nominates a person well in advance, he nominates a son well in advance, and this son is supported by all of the nobility, is supported by all of his brothers, in this kind of a situation, struggles don't arise. But then, of course, if there is no clear point of succession, or no clear position regarding the succession, then there is a problem, and the problems are usually resolved by wars of succession. Okay, so this is the situation. Okay, so now we see that the reign of Shah Jahan is full of policies and shifts in expansion. Okay, so we see a lot of happenings going on during the reign of Shah Jahan, and therefore it is quite important to study. All right, because as far as the Deccan policy is concerned, his expansion into Balkh and Badakhshan, his expansion into Kandahar, all of these things are quite important. Okay, also remember how he came to the throne and came into a position of power in the Mughal Empire. So with that, I take your leave. I hope that you will be studying hard. Thank you.